In this episode, Chris Stevenson, Educational Partnership Coordinator at Schreiner University, talks about creating opportunities for rural Texas Hill Country students to get a university degree at Schreiner University.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm thrilled today to have Chris Stevenson.
Yeah.
Let's start that over. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back with another episode, and I'm thrilled today to have Chris Stevenson. Chris, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Chris, could you tell us a little about your academic and professional background?
Sure. I basically was in public education for the better part of 3 decades. Graduated from Johnson City High School in Johnson City, Texas, OBJ High School there in 1985. Went on to get my bachelor's at Tarleton State University. Was a teacher, a coach. About 8 years into that format, I went back and got my graduate degree in administration and started my administrative career in Wimberley, another Hill Country community. Was there for a short time as an assistant principal, and then went to Harper as the middle school and high school principal in 1999, and spent 14 years as a high school and middle school principal, and then 7 years as the superintendent in Harper, with the majority of my time networking and working with all the different school districts in the Texas Hill Country.
So it would be fair to characterize you as a Hill Country boy?
Absolutely, 100%, born and raised.
I will think of her name during this podcast, but I live in another world of legal and regulatory compliance. And I interviewed a woman who went to Harper High School, and her dad was the band director.
Okay.
But I'll think of it sometime during this podcast. Maybe you guys would know each other. Not too many Harperites.
The band directors that have been there in the past 25 years, I would know them all.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What's your current role, Chris?
My current role, shortly before I retired in Harper, I started some conversations with some of the administration at Schreiner that had approached me about some ideas they had about a rural strategy for Schreiner University. So when they first brought me on, I was coordinating partnerships and educational partnerships with different rural school districts throughout Central Texas, primarily the 6 counties adjacent to Kerr County. And so my primary work was building a bridge, basically, for all of the high schools, the public high schools, and the private schools, for that matter, to make networking and partnerships with the university to have Schreiner find a way to help serve those communities and those schools.
I've had the opportunity to visit with several of your colleagues from Schreiner, and I learned a little bit about the history of Schreiner, and it was actually started to provide an educational experience for basically Hill Country Ranch boys.
That's right.
And it sounds like you, even personally, are continuing that tradition for Schreiner today.
That's right. But it started over 100 years ago, primarily as a military institution for young boys, 100 years. And this actually is the 100th anniversary of Schreiner's beginnings. So there's been a lot happening on the campus in regards to celebrating those things. And it's been fun for what I've been doing, because it really is tying back to their initial roots, where we're making sure we're reconnecting, but not just obviously Kerrville students, but all of the students within about a 50 to 75 mile radius, of making sure that we're having an opportunity to visit with students and administrators and other people in other communities to partnership and bring Schreiner back into those communities. That way we can educate their young people and bring those young people back to those communities is the focus of what we're doing.
And that's one of the reasons I was really excited to visit with you, because of your background in school administration in the rural areas in the Hill Country. You understood the needs, and really not simply the needs, but actually what those students can bring to an academic institution. And now you're sitting on the other side of the fence and maybe thinking about what Schreiner can give back to the local communities in terms of graduated students.
That's exactly right, because my philosophy has been, when I'm going and speaking with young people in these school districts in the Menard, Texases, and Junction and Mason and Harper and Centerpoint, is a focus of trying to make sure that they have an opportunity to have a great education, but to bring that skill set back to those hometowns so they can be a part of the future of those hometowns, a part of the future of those ranches that some of those young people have lived in all their lives, or their families have been there for generations and generations, and trying to make sure that rural Texas is still being supported by not just our institution, but by the education and the careers that these young people can bring back to their hometowns.
So there are obviously several educational institutions in the state systems. Texas A&M has had a rural focus for most of its career. How do you talk to a student about potentially the differentiating between what they would get at an A&M as opposed to a Schreiner?
One of the main things is the atmosphere they see at Schreiner University and the small school, the small town, the small community feel that they get. And so many of these young people that come to the Schreiner that have been in these small towns, they do well because the atmosphere fits what they're used to, from small class sizes to being very involved in different things that happen on the campus. And so it's an adjustment, obviously going from high school to college, but the Schreiner adjustment has been a lot better fit for some of these kids who are coming from these communities because they're used to knowing professors and having the relationships and building relationships with multiple people across the campus that make them feel a part of what we're doing. So it's that ownership that they get to possess and be involved in with the different things that Schreiner does day in and day out, and then building the networking from there, from the first day that they step foot on the campus to the time they graduate, and us trying to make sure that we're marketing them and putting them in the workforce as well.
So is there a type of student that the Schreiner actively seeks, or is it literally just a student by student on that basis?
It is. With the primary rule focus that we're doing is, when I speak with high school counselors and high school principals, it is important that we try to target certain students in their high schools that need a place like Schreiner. That we want to go after the best of the best and have anybody have the opportunity to go there. But what I've seen in my experience, not just as an administrator in Harper from the students that we used to send to Schreiner University, but talking with these other schools now, is that there's so many young people that are in these schools that if they're put in the right spot and they're placed in the right position in a university that can give them the special attention, the one-on-one basis, build those relationships, they will excel. And what we're seeing is that so many of those young people, once we get them on campus, once they can have those talks with those different department heads and see how that's going to work, it just seems to be such a natural fit, especially for some of these young people in the rural schools.
I moved to Kerrville a couple of years ago based upon going to Camp Stewart as a little boy
Okay.
and falling in love with the hill country.
Okay.
But when I got here, obviously a little bit older, more mature, I actually see a lot of opportunity. Do young people, either going to college or coming out, see an opportunity in small rural areas, or are they going to look towards a big city?
That's a great question in regards to some of the new initiatives that Schreiner has started with the development of the new ag science program. We have a new banking program, and the focus on those programs is rural schools and rural communities, and putting these young people back in banks in rural communities and building those relationships with these young people who are coming in with ag, the need or the want to have an ag degree, and focusing those kids back to their hometowns and for jobs that they can have in their hometowns with the different things that we're going to offer. So the need is there, especially the banking program that we're talking about. Is that we were approached by a group of bankers who approached the president, McCormick, and just gave him the idea and the thoughts of, is there any way that we can partnership and develop this? Because small town rural banks are having a hard time recruiting and maintaining employees. And over a period now of about a year and a half, we've indulged ourselves in partnerships with different banks throughout Kerrville, Bandera, and different communities in the Hill Country. And now we're going to be starting a banking minor program for current students, and then also a banking certification program for employees of banks who need further education to help them move their careers along. And our focus with the minor is going to be having the students go back to some of these rural banks in these communities, do internships, and eventually have full-time employment back in those communities that they want to live in.
I have to tell you, that's one of the things that has excited me the most about Schreiner, because I look at Texas agriculture, I look at Texas ranches, and there are a multitude of issues.
Sure.
And banking is one of them.
Sure.
And having bankers that understand real estate, that understand ranching, that understand farming is absolutely critical to the success, but it's only one part. And there's a communication strategy, there's a broadband strategy, there's obviously an agricultural strategy, agricultural economics, and a wide variety of others. And it seems like Schreiner is moving towards providing a basis for students' education in literally all of those areas that they can take and utilize in a rural setting. Would that be fair?
Oh, it'd be absolutely fair, because one of the things that we're doing is some of the banks that are a part of this organization are actually going to assist us in teaching some of the courses. In the design, the 7 different courses that they're going to take were specific banking classes and courses that they've helped design specifically for the needs of these rural banks.
You recently held an event in Schreiner, and I pulled it off the website, called the FFA Development Day. It was back in March. And could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. What that was is the beginning of, number one, trying to promote the idea of Schreiner University having a natural, basically the name of the program is Agriculture and Natural Resource Sciences. That's going to basically be what we're studying. And so we want to start marketing the program by hosting different FFA contests, leadership contests. So we had our very first leadership FFA contest that we had a entomology and a vet tech contest that brought about 80 different students from about 9 different Hill Country schools to the campus. And they competed in those 2 contests. So it gives them the awareness that Schreiner is now in the agricultural game. And so they can start seeing Schreiner as an opportunity to, hey, this might be a place I want to attend, because some of these kids, most of these kids in some instances have never stepped foot on Schreiner's campus, in some instances, no university for that matter. So we're trying to put that image out there, make sure they know we're in this game, and we're hosting some more events in the fall of this year and in the spring, with an estimation of possibly bringing anywhere from 600 to 1,000 different Hill Country students on our campus for these contests.
What does that type of event and that type of approach mean to a local rural school district? If I could ask you to put your former hat on back when you were with Harper, what's that give to a school district like a Harper, or you name the town in the Hill Country?
And I'm obviously very proud of the things that Harper does. And I still live in the Harper community, and they have one of the strongest agricultural programs in the state of Texas when it comes to the different contests and things that those 2 ag science teachers do. Number one, it brings a great educational experience from the multitude of the different types of contests and events that these young people get to study. And there's multitudes of different contests that the young people get to do. And so one thing, they get subjected to a great educational experience, but they also have the opportunity in a lot of these instances for additional scholarship funds. For example, in our contest, the individual winners of each of those contests were granted a $4,000 scholarship if they attend Schreiner University. So it does provide a multitude of scholarship opportunities for these young people when they go to these contests to use at any university that they choose to, for that matter. So it does bring many opportunities for them for educational purposes, and to be able to travel and see different universities throughout the state, because universities from Schreiner to Texas Tech to Tarleton to A&M, there's multitude of campuses and universities throughout the state that do host these events.
I have a liberal arts education, so I'm very passionate about liberal arts. And Schreiner has a very vibrant liberal arts component. Could you say a few words about that, and how is the liberal arts education still relevant today, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Sure it is, because it gives young people an opportunity to experience several different things throughout at the university. And it brings a very diverse population to Schreiner, with young people looking at a liberal arts degree. So that's not going to change. The format of what Schreiner being a liberal arts university, that's not necessarily going to change, but we are approaching our different opportunities to bring in different students who have different needs, because it goes back to what we're seeing in Central Texas and what the needs of these communities are. But it's still going to have a strong focus on the liberal arts.
What about the Texas Institute or the Texas Center run by Don Frazier? How does that sort of work into the type of work you do?
And number one, Dr. Frazier does a fabulous job. And if you've had the opportunity to go there and visit the Texas Center, it is phenomenal. And he is one of the best experts in the state when it comes to Texas history. And I love listening to him speak. I go into the Texas Center quite often. We try our best to network with school districts because of the work that he's doing in trying to format a new K-12 Texas history curriculum throughout the state. Schreiner recently, in the last 3 years, I've created a partnership with the Texas Rural Schools Association. It's called the TARS Association, and they love to go into the Texas Center. It's groups of superintendents that come to our campus each summer that do a leadership training. And so that organization, and I'll speak more on that in a minute, but when they're here, they love to go into the Texas Center and see what opportunities that they can take back to their school districts for his podcast, his different things that the kids can access. So it's a wonderful beginnings. I've loved being involved and working with him on a few different projects.
Could you say a few words about the Schreiner Athletics and how that plays into really the recruitment for kids in the Hill Country,
right,
and beyond?
The exact data is close to about 60% of the students at Schreiner University who are either involved in a varsity athletic program or a club or an organization. And it does tie greatly into giving young people not another opportunity to continue to compete in some of their interests that they had in high school. The football program is right around the corner in the developmental phase with the target of hoping to start by 2025. There's still some steps and hurdles that have to be cleared, but there is that coming on. So when I'm in these rural schools, one of the things that I saw initially was, do you have an ag program? Do you have football? Because in Central Texas, that's a part of everyday life in small town Central Texas. So it's a huge aspect, and it's a huge recruiting. It gives us those tools to go into these schools and know that a young person who still has a desire to play basketball or play volleyball has an opportunity to possibly do that at Schreiner and stay close to home and do it.
I used to ask people something along the lines of, where do you see X in 2025? But that's going to be tomorrow, basically.
Sure.
Could I ask you where you see Schreiner maybe in 2030 and your continued role with the university?
One of the things that excited me the most when I started at Harper's is I could see that I was going to be surrounded by forward thinkers, people who are always looking to move forward and continuing to develop things that were going to push Schreiner into territories and opportunities that they'd never seen. My role is one part of that in creating the partnerships with the rural schools. But I definitely see with the current administration from President McCormick on down to all of his other VPs throughout the organization that they're constantly looking for ways to make sure Schreiner is meeting the needs of the students that are coming to us, but especially meeting the needs of where they're located, right here in Kerrville, Texas, and being a part of developing programs that meet those needs. And so I definitely see Schreiner's growth happening. Last year, we had the largest freshman class that they'd ever brought in, and a large focus of that was a large number of students from rural schools. And we are continuing to have a good class, this class that should start in 2023. And so we're going to see numbers grow. They have the ability to absorb that growth in their future in some of these new programs, from football to the ag program, to the banking programs. The different things that they're adding are only going to help us grow forward, because kids now can see I can stay within an hour of home, and there's not a degree that they have to look for that they can't find at Schreiner.
We unfortunately, Chris, are at the end of our time. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself, your role at Schreiner, or Schreiner itself, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Sure. My office in the Welcome Center there at the university. They can always reach me through email, cstevenson@schreiner.edu. My main focus is going to be, if it's sitting down with one parent having lunch in Junction, Texas, and they want to know more about Schreiner University, I will drive to Junction, Texas and do that. I meet many families and kids on one-on-one basis throughout many of the communities in Central Texas. So if they are needing to make a visit on the campus, we want to bring them to the school. We were hosting many schools this past year that they're bringing, whether or not it's 10 kids coming from a little place like Lakey or 100 coming from a school like Bandera, that we want those kids on our campus and we want to see it, because what we're learning is that for most instances, in a lot of these cases, it's the first time those kids have ever been on a university campus. So they can reach out to me, and I will set up especially one-on-one meetings with them and talk to them about what Schreiner's doing, especially for their students, their families in those rural communities.
For those who did not understand what Chris just said, I'm going to talk about the passion in his voice. If you are interested in a university education at Schreiner, give him a call, reach out. He is as passionate as I've seen anyone at Schreiner, and there's some passionate people there. So I hope we can continue this conversation.
I do too. Thanks for having me.
This is Tom Fox again. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the award-winning Hill Country Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you will subscribe or rate and review wherever great podcasts are listened to. The Hill Country Podcast is a production of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network. I hope you'll join us again for our next episode.